Welcome everybody to today's ordinary council meeting of today's date, 28th of November. Welcome to those online. Thank you. We have had a council meeting this morning of finance, so the council prayer has been read. Everybody is here, so there's no apologies there, and I have no public forum today. I just remind councillors the rules around conflict of interest, as you're well aware, and you can declare now or when the item comes up. Sorry. Councillor Charlotte. Conflict of interest
of item 12 of the C's report of the Bolton District Historical Society roof replacement.
Okay, thank you. We'll register that as conflict of interest. And I'll deal with that as it comes. Councillor Morn, did you have something? Okay, thank you. I've had no changes to the order of the business. I'll look now to confirm the minutes. Looking for confirmation or changes. Looking for changes starting page 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 and 19, 21, 20, 21 and through to 22. Any alterations, please? Would somebody like to so move through an accurate record? Councillor Carter moving, Councillor Charlin seconding. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. Item number 7, the follow-up actions from the previous meetings. Who will be taking us through that?
I'm happy to, Your Worship. So there's number there that have been closed, and staff are in the room if you've got any further questions. I have followed up again with Lynn's around the macron above the rangatike and still haven't received an answer to that, in case anyone was wondering. I would have thought we would have by now, since they met on the 15th of October, so we'll continue to chase them.
Any questions with regard to the first 4? No. Any questions regarding 5 through to 9? Councillor Louder.
Item 8. There seems to be no resolution at all with the Bulls bus lane. And are there any other investigations going on, or is it there is?
Do you, the Chair? Yes, yes, there is. We have a new alternative idea that we are looking at. I met out on site with suppliers, and we had a plan in place. We then got some details of a development that's going to happen in that area, which means it won't fit where we had to, and we're meeting again in a week or so to see if there's an alternative. So we just kind of looking at the nuts and bolts of, is it possible? And if it is, I'll bring it back to council and I'll let you know what it is. It could be quite a simple solution.
Anything further? Would somebody like to move with seat, please? Thank you. Councillor Linglet moving. Thank you. Councillor Dalgety seconding. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Moving to the Mayor's report. Before I go into this, and I'll be taking it as read, I'd like to make a couple of comments. The first comment is a recognition of the passing, acknowledgement of the passing of Nikki Kay, Member of Parliament, Auckland. She passed away. The reason, though, I want to make a special recognition to her, because from a personal level, 2015, she was the Minister of Civil Defence. During that time, a very stressful time for our district and for me personally. I subsequently ended up in hospital under sort of an emergencies type situation at the end of that process. And she took it out of her way to ring me twice a day to check on my welfare when everything else around her was in a turmoil. She was an incredible politician. She crossed the House to express her view. So I personally and from this council acknowledge the support she gave us. The second piece is I'd like to apologise to council because I made a comment the other day with regard to a roading issue at Rangiwai, a small road servicing two people, and I said I was surprised that you hadn't heard about it through, and I thought that I had covered in a previous mayor's report. I haven't spent the time going back through those reports. I did reference roading on a number of issues, but not that specific event. So I didn't set out to mislead council in any shape or form. There were a number of discussions around roading, and specifically the discussions were also with my deputy mayor and staff. So an apology. Additional to the mayor's report is a tabled document I finished the other day on the LGNZ sector meetings, the 21st, 22nd of November. And what I haven't completed is the Zone 3 report that I'll do for the next council. But the timing of those meetings was pretty tough, getting the information together in a form that you could get benefit from. And I thought the more important one to have completed was the sector meeting, because that is where ministers made a series of, in effect, promises or signal legislation. So I will take, on that basis, I'll take the reports as read and the attachments to them, and to take any questions around that or my diary details. Councillor Pikitiora.
I just wanted to acknowledge the work that you've put in behind the scenes in regards to the mahi to do with the Ratana, and in particular, as you rightly pointed out, successive governments have talked about supporting Ratana, and I just want to acknowledge your work in being able to see that community getting $10 million going to.
Yeah, but thank you. It isn't, Ratana is an ongoing fluid situation at the moment around finalising details for assistance there. And I was on the phone to the Minister's office this morning. I may well end up going back down to Wellington. But thank you, Councillor Lambert.
I was just the same article on the Gentilani Road. I went over it last week, and this was very accurate. The number of logging trucks was staggering. The speed the empty ones were going coming back was, and you could just see the deterioration of the road, and getting stuck behind one when they can only go about 2 k's down the road was very frustrating. So it was probably an accident waiting to happen in a lot of ways.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Lambert. There's been a number of off-record discussions, or in confidence discussions around that situation, and I'm hoping to see some, recognition of change that is needed in that space, both from a short-term and a longer-term vision, because this is a road that we have approached NZTA with business cases a number of times. But thank you, Councillor Okawa.
Mayor Andy, I also want to tautoko what Pikitiora said, but also the fact that, you're getting up at 4:30 in the morning to go to a dawn ceremony for the opening of the Sargent Gallery, the whare for Sargent Gallery. Kudos to you, Mayor. Also, I also attended on the 11th, the sub-regional briefing, and just to say that it's a new way for everybody, and seeing all the councils there navigating their way. And then the next day at the Hui, the regional Hui briefing, also with that sub-regional one, and the good attendance there. So, kia ora.
Councillor Loudon.
Just regarding your LGNZ report, just number 3, on Council Mark, can you elaborate why Council Mark did not work for ANZ?
Why Council Mark has not what?
Did not work for ANZ?
Yeah, so Council Mark, I found personally challenging, and the process was challenging for council per se. at the conclusion of council mark, I questioned the process that had been used. And because I questioned that process, council mark at that stage said, we don't appreciate you questioning it and we intend hammering it. End of quote. Subsequently, there was an apology from LGNZ to me personally. Subsequently was a letter of invitation from LGNZ to be part of the reshape, because the difficulties that we had with council mark, or I had with council mark, weren't unique to our district. There are a number of other councils with similar concerns. So council mark has been reshaped. First of all, do I believe that in the value of having a benchmarking process and some form of council mark? Absolutely. Was I happy with the process that was used? No. But I think they've taken a number of those concerns on board, and they publicly talked about that in Wellington, about how they reshape.
Thank you.
Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. I want to thank you for the beginning of your report and attending the event, the Abuse Under Care following the Royal Commission of Inquiry event. I think that's been a tough one for a lot of people, and I really appreciate that you fronted it for our council. Thank you very much. And I would also like to say thank you to the council for the beautiful wreath that Tanya at Blush Florist put together for Armistice Day, that myself and two other loyal servants of the community rocked up to present on Armistice Day. There were three of us, and it was really actually lovely to have that race. So thank you, council.
Thank you. The apology from the Crown, there have been a number of other conversations, some as early as or late as today, around, for instance, how council can apply for funding to look at finding whether there are any unmarked graves in our district, and assistance with a memorial. But certainly as part of that whole process, our district was to the forefront of that, obviously because of Lake Alice. When you attend a session like that and people are ministers and heads of department are absolutely saying, acknowledging that torture occurred in our country of young people, nothing is more traumatic or harder than that. That's a Rakawa.
Kia ora, Mayor Andy, on page 43, under Māori wards, just two questions. Kaipara and Upper Hutt Council, if they chose to disestablish, and we all had to, have this kōrero about whether we wanted to keep it or not, and now that we have to go to referendum, is there not a way, how can, I just want to know if you could answer this, how come, could Kaipara and Upper Hutt also go to referendum as well, because they've made a decision, could not their wards, like our ones have to, vote to have or to establish a Māori ward as to not have one? Is there?
I'd ask for guidance on this, but my understanding would be that they could go down that path. So irrespective of the council decision, they could possibly go down the path, but I would need absolute confirmation of that as a process. I'm not sure whether staff can give me direction here.
Yeah, I think the options to them would be similar to what you go through in a representation review, where they could ask the community could ask for a poll and then go out and effectively decide to have their own referendum. I'm not sure with these councils whether they put the option to them of having a binding referendum, which is what you decided here. But there certainly is always that option around members of the public actually asking for that to happen. So there are options for them.
And now the second question, second part of that was how can the councils that have decided or are deciding to refuse holding a binding referendum, is that a thing? Is that something that,
As I understand it, they would be breaking the law. If they just, if
We
the
didn't.
government said that there has to be a binding referendum and they refuse to take part in that process, my understanding would be that that'd be
Breach of
a
the.
breach of
Yeah.
the law.
thank you.
Any further questions from my report? Thank you very much. I'll move that it be received. Have a seconder to that, councillor Duncan. Thank you. Those in favour? Those against? Carry. Moving to item number 9, the Chief Executive's report, which I suspect will bounce back to the Deputy Chief Executive's report. You wish to take it further somewhere? Could this be, would somebody please move that this report be received? Thank you. Councillor Wong, Councillor Lambert, those in favour? Those against? Carried. Balls in your court.
I'll do what we normally do and take you through each section. You will note, I'm just handing something out that we'll get to towards the end of this report, or Baylena's format. So just if there's any questions on items 2 or 3.
Wait just a second while people settle down. Thank you.
Page 15, Wayne.
So any questions around staff movements or events held over the facility, council facilities? No, please carry on.
Now moving on to the health and safety dashboard, which is also attached. Over. Right. Item 5, some of you may remember that we used to provide a very similar document that you'll see in attachment 2, which is what we have coming up in terms of consultation and engagement. And it sort of dropped off because things had gone a little bit quiet, but we've decided to reinvent this one and bring it back to council each month, just so that you're aware of the engagement and consultation processes that we're currently underway, and we'll keep adding to them as we understand them. But also the community committees, I know, found it quite useful in the past. So it's a good way for us to capture it for ourselves, but it's also good information for yourselves.
Yeah,
Councillor
I
Lambert.
just have a question around the local electoral reform issues paper. I see we're submitting on it. What are we?
That's further down.
Oh, sorry. Well, I'll park that question.
Okay, thank you.
I'll
Very, very
come
happy.
back to you, councillor.
Park, Julie.
And that section 6 is around noisy trucks in Taihape, and there's been some information provided.
Councillor Duncan.
Yes, just once again to say thank you to staff for the time and care taken in addressing this. And I've had a personal email, so saying thank you very much. So thank you, Kevin.
Moving on to section 7, so just an update. We will probably provide this every 3, 6 or 12 months so that you understand how many of the rate remissions are being granted by the Chief Executive.
Could I just ask, with that process, could we also list the number of new homes that have also been, because not all new homes have applied for this?
So you're asking for the number of new homes that haven't got this?
Well, if the total new homes, and these are the number of homes that have applied for that process, might be interesting in itself.
I think that's part of what Mr. Callis will be providing to the Policy and Planning Committee when he does his regulatory update
Lovely,
on all those stats.
thank you. Councillor Pikitiona, do you have a
I'm
question?
waiting to get to us.
Okay.
Carry on,
All
please.
right,
She's got a
now,
question about it.
section 8, at a recent executive leadership team meeting, Arno brought these figures to us to give advice on how these, the tonnage has increased and the revenue increase. And we just thought it was useful for council to understand this. So Arno, I'm not sure if you want to say anything more about it.
Yeah, thank you, if I may, through the chair. It's interesting numbers. It's with all things, we started work on this about 18 months ago and things in the background, a lot of work's being done. And then finally the numbers starts looking better. And this is one of those examples where I think the numbers now are becoming quite interesting. So for the first time, our monthly revenue has gone above $100,000. That's quite a big deal. We think it's a mixture of us being much better at controlling what goes on in the transfer stations, but also that we've raised our fees and charges in accordance with what government requires and the levies and all the other bits and pieces. So it's beginning to reflect, and that's a positive thing. And then Raj, our solid waste officer, he's started some initiatives. Originally, I thought some of these would be nice to have. For instance, the battery heaven. You don't throw your batteries in the bin. There's a very high risk of fire if you do that. You send them to battery heaven. So he's put out that. But suddenly we have collected almost 1,000 kilograms of batteries only. These bins are super popular and people actually use them all the time. And the same goes, there's a mobile phone scheme where you hand them in, they refurbish the ones that they can and then give them to charity. And the ones that they can't refurbish, they have a recycling route for those. And suddenly there, we're up to almost 100 phones that's gone on that route. So these numbers are beginning to look quite positive, and I thought it's a good time to share. Thank you.
Any questions around that item? Councillor Moore.
Just a quick one. The extra income, obviously, that is the tonnage of solids going into the landfill. Is that a good thing? Wouldn't it be better to have, I know it's good for our income, but as environmental thing, is it better to have less? So there's two prongs.
Yes, so that's a very good question. So the answer is we don't want to put more tonnage into landfill. That'll be bad. We want to reduce our tonnage to landfill. That's one of our biggest focus areas. In this instance, tonnage is still a little bit uncontrolled because of how the transfer stations work. We have, however, installed weigh bridges in Bulls and in Taipi. So now we have weigh bridges in Martin, Bulls and Taipi. And we are closing that loophole by the end of this year, early next year. So I would expect that to come down a lot. So that's a big positive for us. And then the income, we have got to remember, the income is offset by a cost to landfill. So those two are related. In the past, they were not directly connected, and now they are. So that's a positive. But we don't want to increase tonnage, definitely.
Right.
Cookswall.
Yep, Cookswall, there's a mention there of a meeting that was held yesterday. So Jared will be here later in the meeting if there is anything else you want to ask about that one. Okay, Elgin Awards. This was fantastic for our team, our IS team, to receive these 2 awards. And it coincided with Karen Kruwagen's last week of work here. So it was very bittersweet, but really good for that team to receive these. And I think one of the things they mentioned when they gave these awards out was how they actually managed to do both the projects at once, which is no mean feat. Submissions, I just want to meet.
Just before you go off that, could you pass on councillors' congratulations as the governance back to the operational team? Because that's significant. We should recognise that.
It's hugely significant, and we've mentioned around this table when they're watching, it's people that I forget who exactly it is, but mentioned the cyber security, and that's a huge feather in their cap. But even the Project of the Year award, they won that in competition with, I think it was Christchurch and Wellington. So for Ring to take out 2 of those major awards, it's a huge bump for that team. Yeah, so a lot of it's under the radar, as you know, and not often we've been here for a lot of money. And this shows that money's been well used and it's closed some of those cyber security avenues that we had open. So it is well done to the team.
Councillor Wong.
Just as an addition to that, one of my ex-students works for the Nelson Council as a cyber team, and he thinks the Rangitikei team is actually very respected. he phrased them, I had no idea what they did.
And that's a sign of
That's good, it's
health.
It's like an absence of knowledge and of submissions.
Yes, so submissions, I'll just make a couple of comments about some of the submissions that are coming up, and then there's a few questions I understand. So if we move to the table on page 66, the very first one there about the use of remote inspections. So tied to it, or MB is asking for submissions on this, but tied to it, I have done a really good submission, which they have sent out to a lot of the councils. And Johan has been working through that submission and is endorsing Tai Tuara's position on this, which seems to be a bit of a collective approach across councils. So just to let you know, we will be submitting on that tomorrow in support of that submission, and that will get loaded up onto our website. The other one I want to make mention of is the electoral, so their local electoral reform issues paper. So I met with His Worship yesterday to go through the 5 key issues that are actually in that submission. And I've got some key points from that discussion, which I'll put into a draft submission, and then I'll send it around to the rest of the council, so you have an opportunity to feed into any of that. And we will try and bring that back to one of the meetings in December, so council can actually take that one off.
Yeah, councillors, and for those on listening in, the workload that councils across the country are facing in this very short time frames in terms of submissions. It's not only these submissions, for instance, within Horizons, we have transport, we have climate change, and we had meetings on climate change yesterday to take forward. We have a very tight time frames for expressions of interest for city and regional deals. It really comes down to what's our capacity to be able to do these things, and some of them are incredibly important. Piki Tua.
So my question's around the submission, or to be confirmed, to do with the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi Bill. I want to acknowledge firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the tens of thousands of people that participated in the Toitū Te Tiriti March earlier this month. Included within that were a number of people that came from this area to both Māori people and other people. And I'm just interested to make sure, I want to make sure that it gets on somewhere that this has been brought up. And I'm interested to know what our stance would be as to whether or not we would be looking at putting in a submission around it.
Certainly when does the submission close?
7th of January.
7th of January. And my feeling is that yes, we should submit around it, but it is important that we have a council position, rather than just a submission made by approved by me through staff, etc. The potential, how can we handle that in that sort of time frame?
So I wonder if it's a discussion for Te Rupuahi Ka, because you will get this report in 2 weeks as well, but I'm more than happy to send around the information prior to the meeting to see if there's any position that we want Te Rupuahi Ka to bring back to this council. Would that be all?
I think that if we circulate it also out to councillors, the information there, and if they feed information back through to myself and Ms. Gordon, we will then use that as a basis for drawing up a submission. Would that meet your expectation?
Yes, it needs to be everybody involved in it as far as I'm concerned. It's not just, it doesn't just affect it affects this country as far as I'm concerned.
We'll circulate to those that we feel.
Thank you.
Caused. Thank you. Councillor Lambert.
I'll unpack my question, but I think It's pretty much answered. So we'll get a copy of that local electoral reform issue paper. And
Yes.
we can provide feedback. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I was on a Zoom call about it, was it last night?
Night before.
Night before,
Mm.
sorry, I lose track of nights.
Mm.
And yeah, we'll look to put something together there as well.
So what I'll tend to do, I'll try and do this tomorrow, that send out the key points that we're going to cover in a submission, and then if you can feed that back to me, then we'll draft it up as better words.
No, thank you for that.
If there's nothing else on consultations, so the item 12, the balls and districts.
So just hold on. So councillor Sharlin, you've declared an interest with regards to item number 12. What it may be to demonstrate how we treat these, I'd ask you to step out of council just for this article. Scott, if there are questions that we need to come back to you on, and then we may pull you back for information purposes.
Great.
Thank you. Item 12.
Thank you. So when I wrote this, I wasn't aware of all the invoicing and the costs that have been spent on this roof, which is why I've put a separate paper in front of you now. So going through the table document that I've given you, the society applied through a LTP submission and were granted, in the paper it does have the resolution in there, so, and we're given funding of just over 21,000 for the roof, and that was for materials. So Mr. Sharland approached His Worship a couple of weeks ago to say the work had now been completed. The materials had come in obviously significantly less, and asked if council would consider, on that basis, if council would consider paying for the installation of the actual roof and all the fittings and the cost, and all intents and purposes, the labour cost. And so I've put those numbers in front of you. So the total for the whole roof, for all that work, was just over 17,000. Noting they got 21,000 just for the materials. And that would leave a balance, if council agreed to fund the whole job, that would leave a balance of about 3,800. So I've put a new recommendation there, recommendation 2, based on what I know now, rather than what I knew when I wrote the paper. And so that's now asking council to consider whether to approve funding the total cost of the roof, or whether you don't agree with that process and just go back to the materials.
Take questions around councillor Carter, councillor Dowden, councillor Carter.
I have concerns regarding this request and the request that was passed whilst I was away overseas of the 21,000. When the society put forward their case regarding the premises for their use, they asked for a peppercorn rental of $1 per year for 99 years. And at the bottom of their proposal, it states, we will be responsible for the insurance, maintenance and earthquake proofing. So why are we paying for the maintenance on that building? Is my question, if they have agreed to do it. I asked earlier, and it was in other papers, it's been dropped off since I've been away, regarding looking at the rental regarding all this for their agreement of $1. And I wanted to have it looked at, to have it as to what other people are paying in council-owned buildings, a market rent. But that seems to have dropped off as well. So now's my time to bring it back up. So I'm concerned regarding the way that they're approaching council to fund a project that they said they would do.
So as I understand it, you're raising three separate issues. First issue is, that council agreed to lease for a dollar, etc., the premises. That's the first issue. The second issue that subsequently council has agreed with this, for instance, with this roof, against, in your mind, the principle of that and the fact that you're away, my determination would be that council has the ability to make a second determination. And it may or may not have been unfortunate you weren't there, but that is the case may be. The third question you're asking is whether there could be a review of rental properties per se. And that would be a subsequent process to this meeting as a request. Have I got it about right?
Just on the third point, that's why I brought Galen up, we did do
Okay.
that, yeah.
Yes, so the only similar situation we've got is with the Hunterville Town Hall, and that is also at a peppercorn rental. So that's the only other building that's leased out by a non-commercial party.
To whom?
That is renamed themselves the Hunterville Assets Community Assets Trust.
I had somebody else, Councillor Loudon, and then I'll go back to you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Loudon.
Just trying to remind myself, where did the $21,152 amount come from for materials? Was that from a quote?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think I'd like to try and deal with that issue now. So the issue is that council made a determination that there would be a maximum sum of 22,000, around 22,000, which was only for materials. The work has been completed and finished, done. And it comes in at 17,000, so under the cost, but it includes labour. So I would need a resolution as to whether we were only prepared to make the labour cost, only prepared to make the material cost, or whether council would vary it on the basis that it was under the total cost. What would be useful, councillors, if we were speaking to a motion? People giving their views. Councillor Moore.
I'll move the motion based on recommendation 2. It's that the council agrees to fund total cost of the new roof of the Bulls Commemorative Centre to be paid from the original allocation, blah, blah, blah. Total amount spent.
Sorry, don't use blah, blah, blah.
Okay,
You're
to
on
be,
time.
I'm just reading up, to be paid from the original allocation to the Bulls and Districts Historical Society, noting the total amount spent is $17,282.34 for the roof materials and installation, noting that if council agrees to the funding total cost, the balance of the unspent funds of $3,869.75 would remain with the council.
So you're putting the two together.
Oh, that's the recommendations written. Yeah.
Looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Loudon, you're prepared to second that. You wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, I just, we allocated the $21,000. I don't know where the quote came from, but it's, not often you get a quote where it's half the price. And the whole job's been done for under what we wanted, what we'd allowed in budgets and all that sort of stuff. The roof is complete, and I think from just going back from the discussion when we did this motion was that we were landlords and responsible for that roof. So I think for any case, we should applaud that it's coming under cost and the job's been done to a high degree of workmanship. So on that note, that's why I'm moving this motion.
Right. That's one speaker in favour. Any other speakers to the motion? Councillor Louder.
I speak in favour. Bulls Historical Society has done a great job in getting this building quite strengthened and re-roofed for a very reasonable overall price. Council still owns it. And I feel as though council should be supporting such initiatives from that council.
Any other speakers? Councillor Wilson. Chair of Assets.
This is a bit of a curly one, your worship. I'm supportive of the great work that the Bulls District Historical Society does, and I agree with the comments that, you know, it seems to me that it's been done at a very, very favourable price, and I would suggest favourable to them as they're the organisation that has initiated it. I'm just a little concerned that the original motion does say purchase of materials. So, and the recommendation too is a new one, are we dealing with the original motion properly and procedurally?
Well,
That's the concern that I have, because I'm just not sure that the second recommendation, which I actually do agree with, but I'm just not 100% sure that it's dealing with the original motion, 24 RDC 106.
Yeah,
That's the
I
concern
share.
I have.
So from the chair, I share your interest here, because what I would be looking for is a noting in the council agendas that this in effect revokes or sits alongside the previous motion.
And I would agree, but I'd like to see this noted somehow and recorded and reflected properly, because there's a little fishhook in here somewhere that says we haven't dealt with that original motion. And that original motion still may negate the second motion that we're putting forward on the table. So I'd just like to take a little bit of advice somewhere as to just to tidy that up somehow.
Yeah, I think I can look at how to tidy that up, but I'll concentrate on the motion as it stands. So I'm not sure whether you've spoken in favour of.
Neither do I.
You said that you're in favour of, so I'll take it that you're speaking in favour of.
I'm supportive of the Bulls District Society, Historical Society, yes.
So I'm now looking for speakers against the motion. Councillor Duncan.
The Grinch. I think this is a great win for them, and we have stepped up and fulfilled our promise to them by covering the cost of materials, and it's been very fortunate that they have it's come under budget, but there is no obligation on the ratepayers of the district to go further and to contribute to the other costs, in my opinion. So I'm speaking against this. I think that we should say that it's a win for everybody. And thank you very much, considering that we have in the last few months hunted around for ways to save money and trim costs, and this has been given to us on plate.
Thank you. Further speakers, I'll go Councillor Carter, Councillor Rakawa. Are you speaking against it, Councillor?
Yes, I can't say anything regarding the motion that was originally put with the 21,000 for materials, because I wasn't here to argue it. I am here to argue the fact of paying for the installation fixings. So I've had a win with $8,000. I've had a win with the $1 million for, or sorry, whatever it was, for the earthquake strengthening, which they were going to pay for to start with. So I think it's got to stop somewhere.
Councillor Rakawa.
I'll be speaking against this motion. Again, I look to for the purchase of materials only. They are receiving rent $1, so they might have saved a bit of money. So yeah, no, I'll go back to for the purchase of materials only.
Just clarification, they are paying a rent, not receiving.
Paying, yes. Yes, sorry, yeah, they're paying $1.
We've had three speakers in favour, three speakers against. I'll go back to the mover, write a reply. Sorry, we've had three speakers for and against.
Yeah, there is a one there for Historical Society of $8,978. I guess I think they've been upfront with their costs. You know, they could have said to the roofing people to charge us 18, whatever it is, and left it at that. So I think, you know, they're being very honest about how they've allocated their funds. I think we do own the building. It is now watertight and earthquake proofed for the next 50 years or 100 years, hopefully. Yeah, and I think it's just what has been a win-win for the ratepayers. They're getting money back. Yeah, and the job's done. So, yeah.
I now must put it to the vote. Those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Motion is carried. Yeah. So what I'd like to move to note is a council resolution. That council notes that resolution 24 RDC 106 refers only to the materials for the roof. Does that cover it?
So if we put that in next, it ties it in, we can't go back into previous minutes and note anything, so if I refer to it here, if we're ever searching for that, it will come up.
I'd just like to see some
Yeah.
reference back to it so that it ties the two together. If it's the most appropriate way to do it, then I'm quite happy.
Councillors, are you happy if I look at tidying this up as a notation in terms of council with the chief executive? So I'll pass that direction on to the chief executive.
I just think I'd note as well as that this resolution sits alongside it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's just less.
You happy with that, councillors? Councillor?
Word correction to item 12.1. Halfway through, replacement roof on the old museum building, should read library.
Thank you. Did anybody want their votes against recorded? No. Okay. Thank you very much. We've done all that. Yeah. Well, that's what we're doing now. Moving to item number 10, councillor Shawan, you can be updated through your neighbour. Item number 10, this is the draft term of reference and membership for the tenders board. Arno, you're the author. Do you wish to take us through this for authoriser?
Thank you, Your Worship. I will step through this, and it's just as for the context, as part of the new procurement policy, council approved the formation of a tenders board, and then this is the start of a conversation of what the terms of reference could potentially look like. So what we've put on the table is we think is a good start, and what we really want to get from council is any feedback on what we've proposed and any proposed changes.
I'll open the floor, but I might make a couple of comments. First of all, in terms of approval processes, that if there are councillors concerned that this is passing a decision-making process to involve staff, there are several stages to this. The first is anything that in this area will have gone through a long-term plan, annual plan type approval process at the very start. Council will then have, as I understand it, an approval process in terms of scope of work for the contract to go out with. Is that correct?
Your Worship, I think in some instances, but if I think of a wastewater renewal for something like that, wouldn't have interest. But if it is controversial or of interest to councillors, I would definitely agree with that, yes.
So I'm satisfied there are some processes there. But I'll make some suggestions, and the first suggestion that I would make is that there should be 2 elected members as requirement as part of the quorum. So there'll be 3, there'll be the mayor and 2 others, that there would have to be 2 of those present. I would also suspect when I look at the committee structures, that I think that it should go be a subcommittee of assets rather than finance or audit and risks. So those are my opening comments and gambits. But other than that, and I'll look for a comment by the chief executive of this because he looks nervous and edgy.
Just a couple of comments really. One is that we're trying, remember why this came out of, it was trying to make it more open and transparent for elected members. So that's the whole purpose of doing it. Just a question on the elected members, if you need 2 of them and there's only 3 of you identified, it may be better to have a pool. So because there's often 2 people away on some days, so maybe you have a pool, but that's something you need to think about. And we sort of welcome this to allow that scrutiny to come from elected members too. It's not that we're trying to hide anything, it's trying to make it transparent and give us the ability to make those decisions more quickly, which is good in a business sense.
Councillor Moore and Councillor Jalgatti, Councillor Moore.
Yeah, the terms of reference look all good, and I accept what Mayor Andy's pointed out. But I'm just interested in the frequency of the meetings. Is fortnightly? Would it be a standing fortnightly meeting, or
we've talked about this? So what the
Seems a
reason
lot.
why we'd set it is that we can then can it. But it means that if we're doing a business decision that we're wanting that to come through quickly, we've got meetings set up. So it won't, I wouldn't imagine you're meeting every 2 weeks, but it gives us the ability not to schedule something new. It's already scheduled, so we'd can it rather than have it for no purpose. We tried to analyse how many of those meetings we'd have a year, but we felt that by scheduling them in meant that there were commitments that had been made so that they wouldn't be held every time. And that's just my concern about if you have 3 elected members and you've got to have 2 of them on the day, it may work, but if you have you could put another one there in this instance and then reconsider that at some time.
Maybe I'd revise my position and agree in terms. Councillor Jalgatti, you were next.
I'm just interested, is this a committee similar to this commonplace in most councils?
I've always operated with one, but others, the Wanganui has gone to the whole hog of saying that once you've approved it in the LTP, you don't see it again. So that's the other extreme. And remember, when I came on board here, there was some challenges all the time as to what was being approved and what wasn't. And that's why we agreed at the front end to open that and be more transparent. We think there's some benefits of having it. It does put a lot of meetings in, which is a disbenefit, I guess, but overall, we think that it will probably improve our business in terms of timing too.
Councillor Hiroa.
I just want to talk all the corridor that's already gone around the table. I agree that at the end of the day, this was put together because there was an issue that was seen, and I think that this has been this write up that's been presented to us is good. I'd also like to agree that I believe that the assets committee chair that makes total sense to me, but also in saying that because of the whole realm it sits in, I would also say that someone within the finance committee chair would probably be on it. That's just what makes sense to me. But I support the corridor that's gone on.
What I might do is take this one bite at a time while you're thinking. Would somebody like to move the receipt of the material? Councillor Hillroy, Councillor Power, those in favour? Those against, carried, thank you. This is in terms of the consideration to appoint a tenders board with regard to the Act. It's Councillor Wilson moving, seconded. Thank you, Councillor Lambert. Those in favour? Those against, carried. Now you come down to, has any further thought around the terms?
Sorry. Council endorses the terms of reference. Yeah, I'm actually happy to move that without amendment.
Without amendment?
Question.
Please take a question, certainly, Councillor Duncan.
Does this preclude other councillors attending? No,
No, same as any other meeting.
but without a vote.
I've got to move, I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Dalgetty seconding. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Wilson?
No, not required.
Just note, sorry, Your Worship, we will note that the tenders board will be a subcommittee of the assets infrastructure. In the terms of reference at the moment, it's got insert here. So we'll put that
Yeah,
in.
I was going to tidy that up under recommendation 4. Councillor Moore.
Just a point of clarification, if we move it without amendment, it is as is in here, but we've talked about maybe an extra member being on and
Prepared to taking it, when I think of the minor level of some of this, I might leave it as it sits.
Should have 4.
Yeah, time, let's, before we move forward, 3, let's just recommendation 4 that the tenders board becomes a subcommittee of the assets infrastructural need. I will move that. Looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Charland, you're seconding it? I think that's the logical place because these decisions are about physical capex works.
another question. Does that mean that the members of the tenders board come from the assets and infrastructure?
Not necessarily.
Good.
It would be,
That's good.
it would be useful.
I have a question.
Councillor.
So this is a subcommittee that's been set up that elected members cannot elect to be on. However, they can attend without a vote.
Correct.
And then those decisions that are made by that board will then come to full council.
No.
No, they won't come to council. So I'm just wondering how democratic it is to have a board that is set up that you cannot be a member of, but another elected member can be. How are we representing?
The answer is on recommendation 2, that it's in accordance with schedules, etc. of the Local Government Acts. So that's where it covers that off.
And you're
I
saying
mean,
this
this is better in lots of ways than just putting it under delegation of staff.
Yeah. This was us, remember what the issue was, which Piki Tūmara was saying, is that there was some confusion as to what was being done and that wasn't being referred to you other than being reported. This gives you elected members the view as to what's happening, and everything's open. So I agree that not everybody will be there all the time and you can't debate it, but it does make it more visible.
Thank you, I appreciate the assurance.
Councillor Louder, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Louder.
Is there any point at which some of these tender decisions go to council, i.e. significant engagement?
Yeah, there's a whole range that still would be going down that way, lots of what we're doing with the pool or the buildings. Yeah, the buildings, the grandstand, things like that, that would be coming that way. And I guess if it was significant enough, you would direct us to do that anyway. This is more the day-to-day operations that's we would normally be doing and you weren't aware of.
If the tennis board feels as though this should be in front of council, will they make a recommendation to council?
I don't think there's any discrepancy between those, but it maybe thinking of that line, you should do a review clause for 6 months or have it reviewed to make sure that that is happening to your level. I don't see it as being an issue, but if you have a review, then you can ask that question.
Councillor Wilson.
I think, in answer to your question, councillor Loughton, that's exactly why we've, put this forward for discussion, and that's exactly why staff have brought it back to us for exactly that question. The simple reality of it is, there was a desire from elected members to have a greater understanding of what was happening in the tender process, and with His Worship the Mayor sitting there, myself as chair of assets and or whoever from the elected member side of things, we might be able to then turn around and go, actually, this one probably needs to bounce back to council, given a little bit of information that you don't know about. It's not a decision-making process, but it's just an awareness of what's happening and another lens. It's quite simply to give some reassurance that tenders and things that are going out are following proper procurement process and following that information coming back for an awareness of councillors. So the reason for having this directly answers the question that you've just asked.
I think too, the other point
Just hold on, question first to councillor Okawa. I've sort of dodged you a couple of times by accident. I'll take that first.
Mayor Andy, it says here that you will appoint the 2 elected members. What would happen if more people say put their hands up to want to be a part of it? Would we go to a vote?
It'll be like any other appointment process. I have the authority to do that, but I tend to share these things wherever I can.
Kia ora.
Go back to recommendations. Recommendation 4. Any speakers to that? I'm speaking in favour. Councillor Hero.
Or I'm speaking in favour for that recommendation. That makes total sense in my head. So that's what I'm going to say.
I'm only going to speak against it on a technicality because I don't think it is without amendment, because there's a couple of significant changes. We're talking about, there's a number of the membership, which was indicated may be changed. And, you know,
So if
I'll sort that offline sort of thing.
No. So if I deal with 4, that will then alter the terms of reference for recommendation 3.
That's 3, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
So we haven't passed recommendation 3. So if you pass 4, it's on the Assets and Infrastructure Committee. Therefore, that amends what's on here.
So it will be.
But we've been effectively out of sequence.
Okay.
And the one about the membership is going to stay the same.
I thought you were talking about having more than.
No, just park that thought.
Right.
Any other speakers against the recommendation 4?
Recommendation 4.
The 3. Speaking against the recommendation 4. I'm good.
Oh, that's a question actually, Andy, and that's in regard to the committee again, membership. Are we representation?
So that
Would that be in 3?
would be in 3.
Thank you.
Right. I'll put it to the vote. Recommendation 4. Essentially, this just says that we'll refer back to assets when we consider the terms of reference in 3. Those in favour? Those against, carried. We then go back to endorsing the terms of reference, which will include the amendment to include assets within it. Is that understood? I have accepted my suggestion that there should be another councillor. I'm prepared to set that aside unless somebody else wants it. So are there any further amendments, Councillor Okawa, in terms of what you're suggesting to me is that when I make appointments to this, I should consider an iwi
Yes.
position. I'll take that under consideration.
Thank you.
Councillor Piki Te Ora.
In regards to the membership, I'm interested to see, to know how, the other side of this, which was mentioned by our CE, is potentially having a pool of people, to take into consideration those people that may be let sick, people. So, if it's the mayor and 2 elected members to take away and, having an opportunity for us to maybe help in the area, is there an opportunity for us to make it potentially 3 elected members?
Well, the issue came down to my concern was about quorum and not the total membership, to be honest.
Yeah. So that makes no difference, does it? As long as it stays in as you wouldn't have the meeting with more than 4 people, but those elected members that had been potentially put in would talk to each other.
Yeah, we need to be very, very clear about this so everybody understands. So as it stands, there would be 3 elected members. And the terms of reference define that, and it defines a membership of staff. And that the quorum would be that there had to be 1 elected member there as part of that quorum. So the quorum, okay? Does everybody understand that? So that's the terms of reference. And what I'd then go back in terms of that reference, Councillor Wilson, you moved this, Councillor Dalgety, are you still happy to be the mover?
Yes.
Under the change that has been made?
Yes.
Councillor Dalgety, are you happy to second? Go back to, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, very, very quickly, I just think we need to be really, really careful that we're not losing sight, as I mentioned before, of what the purpose and the intent of bringing this to the council table. It's because we asked for it. And the reason we asked for it, because we just wanted to make sure that as a good governance practice and as a best business practice for our organisation, governors and our operational arm are in the same room together with some of these things. Okay, we're not going to necessarily be the experts in whatever the subject matter is that the tender board is considering. But we do need to make sure and be assured ourselves as governors that correct process and procedure has been followed by the guidelines of which we set with our policies. And that's why we need to have these people sitting in the room to assure the rest of the members that the correct process was followed. That is the purpose of setting this up. That's why I'm happy with the terms of reference.
Councillor Dalgety, next speaker.
I'm in favour of recommendation 3, basically on the grounds we have a very big capital expenditure program coming up, and getting as many eyes around it makes good business sense to me.
Councillor Hero, you speak.
Yeah, I want to, my comment is around, so Councillor Okawa brought up about iwi, potential iwi membership. So what I'd like to say is, when we went through the corridor around the table as councillors to do with our tender processes, there was something that I brought up about percentage of all tenders, Māori businesses needed to be in there. So in my mind, whether you're that is on everybody. Anybody that sits on this committee, that's everyone's responsibility, not just. Well,
absolutely.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that and to me, it doesn't matter. As long as that side of it and this committee has been taken into consideration, that makes sense to me. I don't necessarily, I'm thinking there's 2 of us there. I'm not necessarily trying to put my hand up, to be honest.
Is there anybody speaking against this? Right of reply, although nobody's spoken against you. as a hint.
On the grounds that there, I'll take that hint, not required.
Put it to the vote, those in favour, those against, carried, thank you very much. That moves us through to item 11, the reports for information. And this one. So would somebody like to move the receipt of this, please? Thank you, councillor Charles and councillor Lambert. Since you've been on the score sheet a lot today.
Just made a mental note of that myself.
Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Just one respect to myself.
On the side. I think, as we always do, we'll just step through them. I will point to things that I think are important to make specific note of, and then we'll just take questions. So the first one is the Martin de Bulls wastewater project. Two things I think of note would be we are anticipating the new national wastewater standards. There will be a draft version of that by March next year. We've gone back to the DIA and said to them, we are in a bit of a precarious position in the sense that we've got consultants and we need to complete a lot of work at a high cost. We don't want to be in a position where by March, April next year, we realize we've gone down the wrong track and we now need to do something else, and then all the money is spent on the wrong thing. So what they've committed to is they would give us some guidance by the middle of December for councils like ourselves in the same position. Some of the other councils have put their projects on hold, for instance, until this comes out. So we, after the middle of December, will have a better steer on where that should be going. The other one of particular importance would be dialogue that we started again with ANZCO. And there's a high level of interest from them to form part of this. So the idea would be some partnership where they would become a trade waste customer of ours. And we will then hopefully be in a position where we could remove another discharge to the river and consolidate it all into one plant and do it in one place.
Take questions around just, so this is one.
Yes.
I just find it interesting to note that ANZCO would, because I raised this exactly issue with ANZCO previously, and they said not interested.
Yes.
Our times change. But presumably if they come on board, because I had anticipated this early on and thought the pipeline would have run down State Highway 1 corridor rather than dogleg away from it. Which I know the reasons for that, but presumably that any extra pipe work to connect would be at their cost. Go, councillor Lambert.
Yeah, just quickly on that, I did a tour of ANZCO as a part of another group, and there's one thing they brought up in the talk was their concern going forward, long term, their consent at their disposal was becoming quite a worry for them. So it's funny how it dovetails into what's happened there.
But can I just make one comment there as to exactly what you were saying? We are talking to the ANZCO and Bulls. The ANZCO and Bulls were saying to us they are separate from the ANZCO on State Highway 1 and they are not speaking on behalf of them. So we will pick up that conversation with them too. So at the moment, it's only the one in Bulls.
That clarifies that. Thank you. Councillor Dalgety.
Yeah, sorry, I was just wanting to clarify that it was ANZCO Bulls, but we're going to now have a conversation with ANZCO Martin. Right.
Councillor Carter.
ANZCO Bulls is regarded ANZCO Manawatu too.
Oh,
Look, I think we've clarified this.
And the Manawatu goes past their front door.
Okay, so this is an information process for you. Anything further about point 1, Martin to Bulls? No? No.
Thank you. We'll move on to the Ratana. We'll move on to the Ratana wastewater project. We are right in the middle of the consent process. We've had 3 parties that submitted. 2 of them were against. We were negotiating with those 2 parties to see if we can come to an agreement, which would have meant we don't have to go to a full hearing. Unfortunately, I don't think we're gonna achieve that. Specifically, one of the submitters is quite set in his position, so I think this is heading to a full hearing early in the new year. We've already requested a date for the full hearing. We're still trying to do some things to try and see if we can get them across the line, but I don't think that's gonna happen. So this could take quite a bit longer, and cost quite a bit more.
Quick question for me, Chair. So, I don't think we need to go into any details here, but the reason for the current concerns, can they be mitigated, do you believe, within the current project scope?
No, only at enormous cost.
Councillor Moore.
Just a question on the 10 million going to Ratana. Is any of that tagged or will be going into this project?
And my understanding was from the minister's response government on the government websites that 3 million would be coming to infrastructure with regards to Ratana. My understanding was that that was for wastewater, and then there'd be 7 million for buildings. So I'm seeking clarification from the ministers, and that's why I've been in conversation with the minister's office to get full clarification on that. So I'm chasing that position. Councillor Dalgety.
So, given the submitter is against this, so are we allowed to take the stance? So you realise that this is going to cost the ratepayers, blah, blah, blah? Is it we allowed to say that? Do they get full knowledge of that? Or they?
So you'd like,
you can go if you like. Because I think you might have more experience. Yeah. It's a sad reality. And, you know, you can't be seen to threaten and saying, you know, somebody who wishes to submit against a council process, they will be doing that on the basis of their environmental concerns, etc. That's their right.
Mm-hmm.
The implication is, does it come at a cost to council? Absolutely. But that's what the processes, RMA processes, put in place to serve.
Thank you.
One further question, just and on the subject without hacking on, but clearly if this is the extent of where you feel we may be going down, then Horizons have been advised, because we know I've got a treatment plant there that's in breach at this point in time.
Actually, we submitted a program to them to get to a point where we could submit the application, and that actually included something like this happening. So we are still on track with that program that's been approved between us and Horizons. So for Horizons, they are comfortable with how things are going.
Councillor Dalgety.
If I remember correctly, we're also getting some central government money, but even before the latest lot, but wasn't there quite a strict timeline around that?
There was, although we resolved that, where they have given us the rest of the money, we're going to spend it, or we have spent it on pipes and other things, so we can move on.
That's not an issue, thank you. Yeah.
I'll just make a comment. Deputy Mayor's comment about do we have any hope? I still have hope because the submitters are supportive of the concept. So it's how you deal with the discharge of the treated effluent that's causing some of the issues. And so the debate then is, can you have a wetland? I think this is right. Can you have a wetland instead of what we're proposing? Well, in my view, you've consented to all of this, and what you're actually arguing over is that. And this is both of them, I think, are submitters that submit against every proposal. So we're a long, long way away from where tradition used to be. So you would think that we might be able to lever off that to get that through. So they're supportive of what we're doing. It's not like there's opposition to that. What they're talking about is a technical way of dealing with it at the end, and it's really supplementing what we're trying to do rather than even taking us on a different avenue.
Anything further about the CITO? No, we'll move on.
Thank you. The next one is the Martin Water Strategy. I think the only thing of note there is The discovery of the silica sand. Interesting, the Tutanui bore, the existing bore, we've used it quite a bit, but never in a condition where we actually captured everything that came from there and we could have a look at it. So silica sand is a new challenge. The suppliers are working on ways that we can pre-treat and get rid of the sand before it hits the membranes. As you can imagine, you don't want sand on the membranes. And they will propose something to us shortly as to what we can do to remove that before that happens. I think the thing that we got to remember here, although the trial period is getting longer and longer, it is prudent to do this work to be sure that whatever we purchase is there for a long time and will actually work. So I'd rather spend the time up front and be sure we get it right.
The only question, sorry, I'll go.
Just is the silica sand, should that really have come as a surprise? Gee, to have the silica sand in there, I mean, with the process. Is that a surprise for bores in the area to have? I mean, obviously it's there and we're now dealing with it, but.
It is quite a surprise. It depends on how the production bore is constructed and how the strata around it compacts and what can get in. So remember, this is not a chemical that we could pick up in a chemical analysis of the water. This is actually very fine sand that's coming in. And we actually are going to run that bore at the maximum rate to see what happens then, because that hasn't been done before either. So these are unknowns that we're stepping through to figure out what's actually going on in those bores.
This is been running on the Tutanui Road bore, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are you able to determine from the profiles, the drilling profiles from the bores at the dam, under the dam face, whether you're going to face the same issue there?
Again, it's the packing of the strata next to the screens of the inlet screens of the bore that creates the problem. So I think it's the same aquifer, but I'm not sure if it's the same strata, if that's the same where the two bores are. So that's still an unknown as well. But we've got a test pump that's going to go into the new bore and we'll test that as well.
What's the height difference between the two bores or depth?
Top of my head, I think the Tutanui is about 160 odd meters and the new one's about 240, 280.
So it is possible that you may find you go under that silica level. How technically feasible is it that if that was the case, that you then go back to the Tutanui bore and drop down to another level? Is that possible?
I think it's a reasonable question, but I do think that'll be very tricky because there's already casings and things in the production bore. I think it might be a much simpler solution just to remove the sand before it hits the plant.
Okay. I'm not the expert in the field, but interesting. Anything further you wish to question, councillors? So we're still looking at now May. Whakatiora.
Are we still moving down this? Because I've got a question to do with the
Next.
bridges.
So the next item is the Martin offices, and I'm happy to pass it on to Kishore.
So the Martin offices, we put an expression of interest on the GETS portal, and the submission is expected latest tonight. So the deadline is today. So we should start looking at submissions from tomorrow onwards. We've also had an internal workshop with registered vendors here in the council chamber, and interestingly, about 40 odd people turned up. So we had basically put out there what sort of risks that we anticipate, and then we had a discussion around it. Interestingly, there was options that came up in that discussion, which we're trying to see if we could go back and evaluate before we get a contractor on board. Those are around those tanks underneath. So we were always talking about finding those tanks and removing those contaminated soil and all that. So the moment you find contaminated soil and you move it off-site, then the cost just goes into six figures. So interestingly, one of the things that came up was you could choose to dig it up and park it somewhere else within the same site. But again, that depends on how Horizons look at it. One is that there was another option. You could just leave it there and build over it. So these are some of those things that came up in the workshop. Otherwise, in terms of the house demolition, I think we've already found a contractor and we're planning to get that house removed sometime during the Christmas break. So that will happen. The EOC is another subject that we've been discussing. So we've looked at the one in Rupeyu and then there was one in Gisborne. I think the general consensus is we are leaning towards something that's similar to the Rupeyu build. But in order to get there, we're trying to figure out what our inventory looks like and what needs to be on this site. If there's option to store some of the stuff either at King Street or somewhere else, that will determine how much of a footprint we need. That's what we're trying to evaluate at this point. So the moment we come to that, then we could start looking at whether this has to be a separate project or wait until the contractor is found and then do one together.
Yeah, I find this one interesting because when I was in Wellington the other day, I raised with the Minister Mitchell, saying, look, in terms of the reorganisation of civil defence, one of the best things that they could do is regionalise some of these standard facilities around the country. So take this sort of facility I mentioned, Gisborne, for example, as an example only. That the best thing the minister could do is put a series of these around the country. And the minister actually responded and said that he would be in favour of that possibility. So I think with the degree of urgency, we go back to the minister and said, and I'll try and get a meeting with him and say, look, this is the question I asked, this was your response, we're in this process now, would you support us? So I think that we can chase that one up through help us start. Councillor Charlotte, Councillor Hero, Councillor Dalgety, Councillor Charlotte.
Your worship, I was having a discussion with a colleague who's on the Manawatu District Council, and apparently they have got a portable emergency management centre off the army, and it can be put up, it can be taken anywhere, and it's going to be displayed in the town centre in Fielding shortly, I think.
I'll make sure I go and have a look. Councillor Hero.
I know that this is, we're talking about this under Martin. I'd like to know whether or not, well, I'm assuming that this is, it'd be, if exactly what you've just talked about would be something that we'd look at in the other townships.
Absolutely. Councillor Dalgety.
So just to understand what you're thinking there, so would you be thinking or encouraging central government to pay for this build in a district not ours? So we don't have to pay, well, yeah, so that's not a problem, or you are encouraging him to support a build here?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
And surprisingly, he didn't just say no, he was quite supportive. Councillor Duncan, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Duncan.
Would it be unreasonable to request actually that staff have a look at this portable unit rather than just?
One is Fielding.
Yes.
So some are called incident management control centres. So that would be available if you had a major accident or a spill or something. Remember, this is the one that is going to be occupied for a long period of time. One's like in a container. And this one that was proposing both in the model at Gisborne and here is that there are rooms that could be available for the community and used. But in an event that goes over a long period of time, it would be set up for that sort of purpose. So the models that Minister Mitchell was talking about was that if you could have one of those in every district or most districts that could be isolated, which ours can because of the rivers, you'd have a setup that could operate for weeks. And the idea that Mayor Andy was saying is if you could actually pick up any one of those designs, which Ruapehu have offered us anyway, then that makes a hell of a lot more economic sense. So I don't disagree that we should have a look at the incident, but it's called an incident management mobile something or other, which is enabled to go around to any event.
So that would be as well as not instead of.
Could be, yeah. So you could have your headquarters here and have that incident operating out of Taihape or here.
Problem with the portable one is you've got to get it there. So if you've got the rivers shut off going up the guy, you're not going.
Yeah,
Helicopters, maybe.
I've raised exactly that issue.
You know, just, but just to remind, councillors and Ishra, please jump in if I'm going off down a rabbit hole, that I'll need you to dig me out and help me out. Myself and Councillor Lambert, as you recall, as a council, we have been, meeting and having discussions with Ishra and his team and Mr. Benardi around this. The thinking is to think a little bit outside the square, to have the EOC control centre, which can be utilised for a long period of time where it is, but also have it as a standalone space that we can also dual purpose. It could be a community room where people could meet. So we're not just talking about having a tent or a container, we're talking about dual purposing the room to have multiple purposes for us to meet the scope of which we're trying to deliver within this. So just to let you know, that's where the thinking has come from, and that has come from a number of conversations that Ishra has led with myself, Councillor Lambert, and his worship Mayor, as to try to utilise the best of the space as possible. So just to bring you up to speed with that.
Councillor.
I'd just like to total all that, absolutely. You know, I would say that in a number of our communities, and I'm talking specifically about Taihapu, that there are existing areas and places, if you work and have a kōrero community that want to do exactly that. And I'm sure it'd be the same in Bulls, and if they were looking at something in Huntable, so that's really good as far as I'm concerned.
Councillor Carter, Councillor Okala. Councillor.
At present, the units that are used are ones of FENS, mobile command units, which I believe there were a couple put over in Gisborne area at the time of their floods and stuff. And those trucks are equipped with communications coming out of your armpits. And in that you can open the pods in the back of them, and they can be used for all sorts of different things, from hazmat to search and rescues to everything else.
Councillor Okawa, and I'll call it that one.
Is it a need or a want? You know, looking at these other little places that we might want to have a look at, those emergency. The main hub here, absolutely, we've got buildings in each of our towns, $1 million buildings that we could have little outreach centres, sites to use instead of having a look at other things to purchase. Just my whakaaro. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll move on.
Taihape Town Hall project. So I've just received the initial investigation reports, which I'm yet to go through. But on the fire itself, we've just one of the things that highlighted was if we choose to occupy that first level on that town hall, then there are a lot of fire regulations that kind of come into play. So there was a question that was back. So could we look at not using it, which we've always presented that as an option. The moment that comes into the equation, then there's a secondary source of fire egress that comes into play, and the staircase that is there doesn't comply, and the occupancy level goes beyond 400. So there's a whole set of fire regulations that come into play. So we could still keep the first story, only the office side, as long as we cut off that access to the seating area. I think we still should work with the existing stairs there. So all this comes into play only if we start going into that. But we could still keep that as an inaccessible terrace, and people could still access it just to put hoardings and lighting and whatnot. But people will be seated there. So that's come out of that fire report. Otherwise, we are expecting the initial concept seismic design along with the budget costs on somewhere on the 9th or the 10th of December. So I'm also trying to get it looked through by a peer review consultant and a cost consultant before I bring it back to council on the 19th. Yes.
Thank you. We'll deal with miscellaneous.
Before we do that, Your Worship, we've got the Martin Pool at the bottom of the page.
So we have commissioned all that work. They've spent 2 days on site. We've had a whole lot of surveys done of the pool and the beams, and so they got all the information that they need, and they're working on the report that will come back to council that will tell us what the condition of all the assets are and what we can do and how we can stagger things and how much things could potentially cost. And the idea that we have really is to allow councillors and governors to then kind of pick what we want to do now, what can we do later, what can we work into a next 10-year plan. But all those decisions will be based on actual condition assessments, and we'll be able to make some good decisions around there. Also important in this update is CLM. They have been able to secure another pool for the Learn to Swim, and they're planning that early in the new year to start with that. So credit to them. They've done a lot of work in the background with schools and finding alternative solutions.
Can you give us details around that for the council websites when?
I can, yeah, definitely. That's a good idea. We'll organise that with them, with CLM.
Thank you. Councillors, I've asked for a fortnightly update on this project all the way through, so. Councillor Doggerry.
Yeah, so we're really keen in Hunterville to get some coaching up there. I haven't, nothing's been confirmed. No, it would be ideal to be done over the Christmas period, you know, or December Christmas period. Yeah.
Can I ask them to just follow up?
Yeah, please.
Right. Now we're in miscellaneous.
Thank you. So the first one is the Scots Ferry. The thing to note there that we are working on right now is the memorandum of understanding and getting all of those responsibilities figured out and who will do what under what conditions. And the other one that's important is we had a discussion with 2 engineers from Horizons. The idea that we had is to use the stop bank as an alternative access route. So we got to remember, for us as a council, the thing that we are really nervous about and why we are prepared to get involved in this is that the access road floods and the people can't leave. So there's a secondary access through the forest at the back, but quite often that's out of action as well. We then thought if we can have something that we know will be dry under flood conditions and that could become the emergency exit, then that's a good option. And then when we spoke to Horizons, it's a really long way that we would have to convert the top of the stop bank to be used for that. And we're looking at about $500,000. So that would end that conversation for now. Yeah.
Councillor.
Regarding using the stock bank as a way out, the reason for it flooding last time was a breach of the stock bank.
Further down,
but it was still a breach of the stock bank.
Yeah, so we were looking at the levels, Councillor, and it's just really just right around Scots Ferry. So we would have levels and alarms, and there would be a time when we definitely, so even if the road is covered, we could still get out. Obviously, if it gets to the point where that's breached as well, by then all the residents should be gone.
No, they used the forest last time to get out.
Yeah.
So instead of a tractor, we need a car ferry.
Very good. Try Happy Bridges.
Try Happy Bridges. Yeah, so the opening is fairly soon.
11th week. 11.
And maybe as we did last time, I could maybe ask Councillor Duncan if there's an update from Taipi.
Councillor, the ball's been passed here.
Yes, I have an extensive text, not at my fingertips, however, yes, it's some substantial fundraising has been applied for to get this, these finished. We're now down to, there was a potential of 6 bridges originally, we're now down to 5. And they're hoping to have them finished within 15 months. That's the target. And the project manager is pretty confident that they'll get that done, all being well. And the opening of the bridges, the first 2 bridges will be on the 11th, and everyone is invited. No, I'll actually circulate, make sure that's circulated, that invitation again. At Papakai Park, which is at the, right there below the road.
That's the last one.
I've got a question.
Councillor Hero.
Can you help me out here? 10.1, due to higher than anticipated costs, the budget has been affected and as a result, 2 out of the 3 bridges will be built. Next sentence, construction on Bridge 4 has started and anticipated to be completed by 28th of November. I'm trying to make a jump.
Yeah,
down.
okay, so once again, it's 1, 2, 4, 3. They are not being built as in 1, 2, 3 consecutively in with numbers. Bridge 3A has been built. That's the one that goes from Papakai Park. On the full map of the project, they have different numbers. It's not consecutive. Does that make sense? So number 4 is now being completed. So those are the first two bridges to be completed. Because originally it was going to be 3.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Just bear in mind, councillors, that the foundations are a different issue again. So we're talking about, there's been a series of foundations built, but there'll be 2 bridges completed, but the foundations for the bridges are in place and built.
5, yeah.
Councillor White.
If I just add to that, the high anticipated costs, to a large extent was due to that first bridge having a accessibility ramp built to it, so people with wheelchairs and bikes and pushchairs could access the other side of the river, which is one closest to the park. So it was essential that everybody got access to everybody as possible, and that added very much, nearly as much as another bridge cost. That's why that's one of the reasons why the bridge budget was blown to such an extent. So
yeah,
that's sort of partly explains why.
Thank you, councillor. Moving to item number 12, the minutes. Would somebody like to move those minutes as a block?
Move the block.
Councillor Wilson moving, looking for someone nice. Councillor Hero, you're nice. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Would somebody like to move, please, that we move into public